Have you ever picked out a yarn for a project, gotten a few rows in, and then realized you absolutely hate how it's turning out? Yeah, I think we've all been there. Like the yarn looked so beautiful in the skein, but once you started knitting or crocheting, it just did not work. Choosing yarn sounds like it should be the easiest part of a project. But once you actually start looking at all the options, it can get overwhelming really fast. So today I want to walk through how to choose the right yarn for a project, whether you're following a pattern or just winging it, so you can avoid some of those frustrating mistakes. If you're new here, my name is Vicki, and this is Caterpillar Chat, my little corner of the internet where we talk about all things yarn, knitting, crochet, and fiber arts. I also run Fox and Owl Dye Lab, where I hand dye yarn, which we sell on our website, woollycaterpillar.com. So I spend a lot of time thinking about different yarn bases, fibers, and how they actually behave in projects. This is something I've learned from both experience and from making my share of mistakes. Section 1. Let's start with the pattern. The first place I always recommend starting is with your pattern, especially if you're using one from someplace like Ravelry. Patterns will give you some very important information. The yarn weight, lace, sock, worsted, bulky, lace held together, lace and Aran held together. Lots of options. The yardage, how much yarn are you going to need based on the size or the finished object that you're making? And often the fiber type or suggested yarn. This is not random. This is what the designer used to get the result you're seeing in those gorgeous pictures. So if you're a beginner, I would really recommend sticking pretty close to these suggestions. Now, once you've had more experience, you can substitute yarns, but you want to understand what you're changing and why. Because otherwise, things can go very wrong. I knit a cocoa knit sweater last year that needed some structure. I chose an alpaca yarn, and suffice it to say, that sweater has become one of my mom's favorites, but didn't work for me at all. Section 2, fiber content. The next thing, and honestly one of the most important, is fiber content. Different fibers behave very differently, even if they look similar in the skein. So just to break it down simply, wool, like merino, is super versatile. It's a good all-around player. It's warm, it has stretch, and it's really forgiving, which makes it great for things like sweaters, hats, pretty much anything wearable. Alpaca is really soft and warm, but it doesn't have as much structure. So if you use it for something like a sweater, it can end up stretching or growing over time. Cotton is kind of the opposite of alpaca. It has basically no stretch, so it's great for things like dishcloths or summer tops, but it can be a little harder on your hands when you're working with it. And then there are the blends, like wool with nylon. These are amazing for things like socks because the nylon adds durability. Like this sock yarn I'm using from Fox and Owl Dye Lab for our sock knit along. It has 75% superwash merino and 25% nylon, so I know I can wash my newly knit socks in the washer without issue because of the superwash, and they'll be a little bit more durable because of the nylon. So when you're choosing yarn, you really want to think about what the project needs, not just what feels nice in the moment. Section 3. Think about your finished object. This is the step I think a lot of people skip. Instead of just asking, do I like this yarn? You want to ask, what do I want this finished piece to do? Do you want it to be structured, flowy, stretchy, sturdy? Because the yarn you choose is going to completely change that. Like if you're using a really drapey yarn for something that's supposed to hold its shape, it's not going to behave the way you want it to. Or if you use something super stiff for a shawl, it's not going to have that soft, flowy drape to it. So try to picture the finished object and choose the yarn that supports that. Section 4, color and dye style. All right, so let's talk about color, because this is where things get fun, but also a little bit tricky. Not all yarns show patterns the same way. If you have a really busy variegated yarn with lots of color changes, and you pair that with a really intricate pattern, those details can get lost. So a good rule of thumb is busy yarn, simpler pattern. Complex pattern, more solid or tonal yarn. This is actually something I think a lot about when I'm dyeing yarn. I'm always considering how a colorway is going to knit up, whether it's going to pool or blend or highlight certain stitches. So when you're choosing a yarn, you don't want to just look good in the skein, you want to think about how it's going to look when it's worked up. Section 5, budget and practicality. Not every project needs hand-dyed yarn. Let me say that again. Not every project needs hand-dyed yarn. Sometimes a basic, affordable yarn is actually the better choice, especially if it's something that's going to get a lot of wear or needs to be easy to wash. Think baby sweaters. And also definitely paying attention to things like dye lots if you're buying multiple skeins. That can make a bigger difference than people expect. If you need help choosing yarn and finding dye lots, talk to your person at the local yarn store and ask them for help. Getting these dye lots together at the beginning of a project can save you a huge headache down the road. So, if I had to simplify all of this into a quick checklist: 1. Start with your pattern. 2. Pay attention to the fiber content. 3. Think about how you want the finished project to behave. 4. Match your yarn style to the pattern. And 5. Choose something that fits your budget and your life. If you do those things, you're going to avoid most of the common yarn mistakes. I would love to know, what's a yarn choice that you've made that didn't work out the way you expected? Are you someone who picks the yarn first or pattern first? Because I feel like there's a lot of people who have some very strong opinions on this. Well, that's it for this time, but don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit that button down below so you can keep up with all our episodes of Caterpillar Chat. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this episode. I'll see you next time. Until then, remember there's always room in your stash for one more skein. Bye-bye.